So there was another storyline involving Richard Childress Racing, Jeff, that made a lot of headlines. Probably going to make some headlines this week. Chase Elliott, of course, misses Gateway because he hooked Denny Hamlin on the right rear at the Coca-Cola 600, gets suspended a race. During the Gateway race, late in the going, Austin Cindric hit Austin Dillon in a similar manner. Let's just first talk about the incident. It appeared that Cindric had room a little bit on his right side, and he kind of came down and the track a little bit and hit Dillon in the right rear. Austin Dillon and Richard Childress both said this was intentional. They both thought that Austin Cindric should be suspended a race for this, what they consider being intentionally wrecked. How did you see the incident? Did you feel like Austin Cindric was intentionally crashing Austin Dillon?
Well, I didn't see what led up to all that. You know what I mean? I don't know the history. Like in the other two incidences where we did see drivers get suspended, we saw it all right in front of our eyes. We saw a move and then a reaction to that move. And it was like, hey, he did this because of that. I don't know what happened before, or if anything, I don't know what happened. So it's hard for me just to say it was retaliatory because I don't know the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
I will say on a broader picture, like this is why NASCAR really doesn't want to get involved in making penalties, right? Like they really don't. They really would rather the drivers work it out for themselves, because now, you know, you made a stance and you said if you intentionally hook somebody, you intentionally do something to endanger them, there's going to be a penalty and it's going to be stiff. So, which I support, but at the same time, it has to be clear and simple that it was an intentional act. And it's hard to always judge intention. It's, you know, drivers make mistakes. I can show you many wrecks that I got in that I could tell you that people thought it was 100% intentional. Danica Patrick at Phoenix. Like, I couldn't figure out why everybody was so mad at me. Then I went back and watched the video and I'm like, oh yeah, I see it now. But I didn't, even the Jeff Gordon incident at Texas. Yeah. So it has to be clear cut, no question that a driver did something on purpose to make that call, which is why NASCAR really doesn't want to be in that business. Or we look at it, or NASCAR looks at it, not we. NASCAR looks at incidences with a completely different point of view and says, it doesn't matter if it's intentional or not. You know, then where are we? Mm-hmm. You know, then we get into the situation where you mentioned F1 earlier, where you're having calls made on drivers by a group or an individual based not even on intention, based on just the action. And do we want to go there? So these are questions that will always linger in motorsports. You know, in football, it doesn't matter if you intended to hit the kicker late, you still did it. Personal foul, right? Like, do we want to go there? It doesn't matter why. You know, I don't know that we want to go there. I think that is not where we want to go, but I think it just opens up Pandora's box and you'll never get it shut. And this will be a point of conversation with every race team. Like, what does this mean? What are the implications of the massive penalties of parking someone? You can't race next week. That is a massive penalty. And so where does that stop? And it will be a question that NASCAR will have to answer, working with the industry to come to the best solution and then communicate that to everybody. It's very clear. It's very clear. If you intend to do something and it's an act, they're gonna respond to it immediately. In this case, how do they respond to this when you could make a legitimate argument that it was a racing mistake, like you just made a mistake? And this is where NASCAR is going to have to walk a fine edge. And I don't envy them. Like, I don't envy that position. It is their job to police the sport, and so they have to police the sport. But it's a little more complicated, in my view, than well, it's not a little bit. It's definitely complicated, more complicated than the two incidences that we would compare them to.
Well, I think the problem here for NASCAR is that they've set that precedent this year now that you hook somebody in the right rear, we think you crash somebody intentionally, you're getting a one race suspension. But what's different about this incident, I mean, I watched it a few times before we started, and I can't tell like I could. I mean, with the Chase Elliott Denny Hamlin incident, like you said, it doesn't seem like we have as much context for Cindric and Dillon. For Hamlin and Elliott, we had the context of Hamlin ran in Elliott hits the wall, and then he immediately retaliates. And as Denny said, go look at the SMT data. You'll be able to see. I think Denny posted the SMT data that you were talking about earlier that shows the throttle and steering and braking traces that paints a clearer picture. I guess one is that kind of the issue for NASCAR here, is that this one maybe didn't seem as obvious. And like you said, maybe we don't know the full context of what led up to it. But two, like, do they look at the SMT data to try to land on a decision here? It feels really sticky to me for all those reasons.
Well, the SMT data is going to show the two car turning to the left, I'm sure, because it looked like to me he did. But again, like, it just wasn't an immediate retaliatory move. Like I understand why, Richard and Austin, they're connecting this to an event that happened earlier in the race. And so they view it as retaliatory, right? That's their point of view. And I don't know they're wrong. I don't know they're right. That's their point of view, that this was a action that happened earlier. We just don't have that full context like we did in those other situations. And again, the broader picture, and Austin Cindric wouldn't agree with this probably, but the broader picture is the discussion about how you handle these types of situations. Like, NASCAR is a contact sport. It just is. And at what point is the contact too much? And at what point do you have to hold people responsible, even if it's a mistake? And some of our greatest moments in the sport were mistakes. You know what I mean? Like, it's racing happens. Like, when you put people out there and you say, hey, we're going to pay you a lot of money, and everything you've worked for your entire life is right in front of you, and it's a competition. People are going to make mistakes. And at what level do we hold them responsible for mistakes versus knowing something happened on purpose? And that's what NASCAR, not just in this incident, this same incident is going to happen in the future. It's going to happen again. And how do they handle it? It's going to be interesting to see what their take is on it during this week.
Yeah. And I think, even though I said precedent, and NASCAR can do whatever it wants. And we've seen that throughout history. They can change direction on how they mete out punishment. And I don't know if you agree with this, but to me, it seems like there's a line here that they don't want to cross.
Yes, that's what I think.
And maybe they have to come out and say, to your point, like, hey, we're going to suspend if it's blatant, but maybe they step back on this one and don't suspend Cindric because they say, hey, we don't have enough evidence like we did with Elliott and Hamlin.
I think either way, Nate, there'll be an explanation to it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really important. Like, this is a very important week for NASCAR in making this call, because they're defining the rules, right? They're defining the rules. But I don't view this as clear cut like those other wrecks. I think it's way more complicated than those other wrecks. Way more complicated.
Yeah, I agree. And I certainly don't want to see NASCAR reach the point of going to the stewards every time there's contact on the racetrack to see if somebody needs to be suspended.
Well, if we were going to go to the point where we started penalizing people on a more frequent basis, then we would have to change that whole system. Like, you would have to put people, like, do we really want to do that? You know what I mean?
No.
So what do we say all the time? The problems of rules if you have to enforce them. Like, the more rules you have, the more you have to enforce them. And it's just more complicated in motorsports than it is in other sports. I don't care what anybody says. It's just more complicated. When you add the vehicle into the equation. No other sport, right? I guess golf does because you can bring your own clubs, but no other sport compares to motorsports in the degree of complication that the vehicle brings to the rules, right? Think about the thousands of parts that are on the vehicle. So you have to mandate that as well as what the drivers and teams are doing. Man, it is you're officiating on the field, off the field, and the ball. It is just a more complicated process than every other sport.
Hi, I'm Parker Kligerman. For more access like this from Pit Road, be sure to click and subscribe to the Motorsports on NBC YouTube channel.